Hi, how's it going? Let's see here. I'm kind of working on recording who's here. I want to review for exams today, so I'll wait till another couple minutes before things get started. Let's see, Olivia. Okay, I'm going to show the chat. Okay. All right. All right, well, it's 9 o'clock. Let's start. Let's share some screens here and see what I can find. Essays. I thought I had. Maybe I don't. Okay. Let's first. We have an essay coming up, or an exam coming up. Should open later today, and for the exam, you'll have to write a couple essays. Each essay should be 1 to 2 paragraphs long. There's in this week's section on Moodle, there's a little file called handouts, and it gives you some samples of the essay questions. These are the 4 questions. You'll randomly be assigned 2 of them. And so you have them in advance, and you should be ready to write, 4 to 6 sentences on those questions. Okay, and for each question, it'd be nice if you could use an example or some sort of evidence to support your answer. And so that one is on negative feedback and homeostasis. Another is on cell membranes, the molecules in cell membranes and what cell membranes, their importance. A third one is on DNA and how DNA structure is converted into functional changes in cells. And then the fourth one is on the cell cycle, which is that life cycle of the cell involving interphase and mitosis. There's also kind of some hints on how to write a good essay. And so I'd like you to be able to write 6 sentences, so I want you to have the essay questions in advance so that you can kind of think about them and know what to do. There is also a practice exam type thing. And so let me see if I can get to that. That's here. Okay, let's try sharing that. So there's a little, no, that's not it. That's something else. Okay, stop sharing. Let's try it again. SAVM. Let's try this. So I gotta somewhere get to it. On the bottom here, practice exam. There we go. I don't know why that didn't show up though. Can you see the anatomy and physiology 1 practice exam? Yes? Okay, so it has some sample questions. Most of your questions will be multiple choice. There could be some select an answer from a blank. We won't have short answers, but these are kind of help you to go through important topics. So there's a key to this, and you can check the key after you try the exam too. So try it, it's good practice. Okay. So then, the other thing I have is, that's why. The other thing I have should be a some review slides. So let's try sharing that. Okay. So I'll see if I can make this bigger. Do you see the review thing there? Yes. Okay. All right. Let's see if I can make it bigger. Maybe. Okay. So there's one of the things I want to talk about right away is this is, I don't want to say largely, but a big part of any new course like this that has lots of new stuff is just knowing the vocabulary words. And so specific meaning of these words is really something that probably nobody ever gets until you get into a science course. And so there's these words. Each chapter has a little glossary section with probably 50 words. If you know that, that will be really helpful. And so that would be good to know those, be familiar with those words. I give you the ones I think are most important. I give those to you in the chapter hints. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Let's see what's next here. Okay. So, with this stuff too, it's not about who's the smartest or has the highest IQ. It's really about kind of a planning thing. And so it's about working on these words. You're not going to memorize all these words in one night. The exam, when you have an open book like that, it generally just means there's a harder exam. And so you've got to know this stuff before you try. So it's about planning and effort and repetition. And so that's a really important thing. Your most important reference is your textbook. If it's in your textbook, that's fair game. If you find it in some study materials, but it's not in the textbook, that's probably not something that will be on the exam. In the materials I give you, the PowerPoints and the lectures, I'm hoping to highlight the important things. Okay, and that stuff then is always Moodle. And you can always ask me, you can always ask other students, but it's using all these things is helpful. You have to be realistic about what you can do in a single night. And I know there's only one day before the exam, but this really is about repetition and planning and working through it. And then when the exam comes, it's not so overwhelming. So it's about working a couple days in advance. Okay. And again, when you study for things to get in your long-term memory, it's not just repetition, it's about active learning method. Active learning means writing, highlighting, saying things, making flow charts, making concept maps, with flashcards, that kind of stuff, self-quizzing. Okay. I'm hearing somebody's game stuff. I'm gonna mute people. If you're not, hold on. I'm gonna start muting people. Okay. I'm gonna mute people. I'm muting. Okay. I think if I mute you, I don't know that you can unmute. I don't know. Okay, so let's go back to the sharing. Okay, let's go there. All right, so it's just kind of some practice stuff for us to work on. Okay. Um, and if this is causing you lots of stress, which it should cause you some stress, know that a little bit's okay. But if you're having distracting thoughts, if you're um, constantly worried about failing or the consequences of failing, take a break and possibly talk to counselors here at Highland. Okay, there's lots of counseling available. Studying can help you with these thoughts. If you study in advance, it can help you deal with the stress. All right. So I just put together some slides with the most important ideas. Okay. One of the most important ideas is homeostasis. Okay. The idea that the body functions in a way such to maintain a stable um, internal environment. That doesn't mean it's constant. It fluctuates, but it fluctuates in a narrow range. And that small internal fluctuations allow cells and organs to function well. And if you get large fluctuations, that's a big problem. And so small fluctuations, that's homeostasis, and we're working to do that all the time. And the way we do that is with negative feedback. Negative feedback is a control system that detects change and works to make the change smaller. So there's a sensor that activates a control center whenever there's change, and the control center activates effectors. And that's negative feedback, and this is how a thermostat works. You know, so we just switched from the air conditioning to the furnace in the last week. Okay, so you hit the thermostat you put it at a set point, and it tells when things get too far from that set point, and it kicks into either the furnace or the air conditioner, and it does something. We have a thermostat in our brain, and that's detecting body temperature. And so we have this not only for body temperature, for blood pressure, for water levels, for nutrient levels, all sorts of stuff. And so we'll talk about that over and over again. Chapter 1 has a section on anatomical conventions, anatomical position, directional terms, body regions, the surface regions, sections and planes, body cavities, and serous membranes. There'll be a little bit on this, but most of this I'll do in the lab exam. And so this is more lab stuff that I'll do with diagrams. But I'll ask you a few questions on anatomical terminology, anatomical position, maybe a body cavity or a membrane. That stuff does come up. Okay. Let's see what's next. Okay, so that's chapter 1. There'll be some stuff on chapter 1, definitely homeostasis, definitely negative feedback, some anatomy, things like that. Chapter 2, I won't ask you about chemical reactions. I won't ask you about balancing them or things like that. There'll be a little bit on what is an atom, why are atoms different, parts of atoms, things like that. So that might be there. It won't be a huge amount on that. I won't ask you about orbitals. I won't ask you, how many neutrons are in the most common form of oxygen. I won't ask you that kind of stuff. But I'll ask you, what is a proton? What is a neutron? Where do you find electrons? Which of these have a charge? That might be something I would ask. I won't ask you about bond strength, but I might ask you about these types of bonds. The outer electrons in atoms can be shared or exchanged to form chemical bonds. You should know that. The ionic bond is an exchange of electrons and then an attraction between charged ions. Covalent bond is sharing electron pairs. And covalent bonds sometimes are unequal bonds, so they can be polar and lead to hydrogen bonds. Again, kind of what is it and where do you find it? That's more important than going really deep into the details. I'll ask you about water. Um, Water is the most abundant substance in the body, and because it has those polar covalent bonds, it has some interesting characteristics. It's a good solvent. It's good for temperature regulation. I probably may ask a little bit about pH, but I won't ask about chemical reactions. I won't ask about salts and buffers probably, but I'll ask about organic molecules, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Um, Again, there won't be anything about reactions, but more about where you find these molecules in cells, what do they do functionally, why are they important? What role do lipids play? They form cell membranes. They store a lot of energy. Particularly with proteins and nucleic acids, they play really important roles. So I'll ask you a bit about the building blocks for those. There's amino acids are linked together to form proteins. Proteins are unusual because you can make them in any shape because they'll fold up, and so they can be made into enzymes or pores or transport molecules or structural molecules. And so proteins do most of the important jobs cells need to have done. Nucleic acids are DNA and RNA. These are polymers that are made of nucleotides. Okay, these nucleotides all contain phosphates, sugars, and then bases. And there's just slight differences between DNA and RNA. DNA is mostly in the nucleus of cells. RNA is made in the nucleus, but usually works in the cytoplasm. Okay, the DNA is a code that's used to make proteins. Okay, that's really important. RNA is used to regulate DNA and in the making of the protein. Okay, so that'll come up. Then again, probably the main chapter is the chapter on cells. So the living units of your body are cells. We have lots of them. And so we have to kind of know how cells work, what the main structures of cells are. Probably the first two organelles there, the plasma membrane and the nucleus, are the organelles that you should be most familiar with, but you should also be familiar with a little bit about ribosomes, a little bit about mitochondria, maybe a little bit about cytoskeleton or endoplasmic reticulum, but the first two there that we spent the most time on, and those are the ones that there'll be more questions on and things will be more related to. So nucleus, ribosomes. And kind of the key, a lot of the key reasons we talk about the nucleus and ribosomes and DNA and protein is that in all cells, they use the same basic core process to use genetic information. They all have DNA code, big DNA molecules stored in their nucleus. They will copy parts of that DNA. Genes are copied in a process called transcription, where the enzyme RNA polymerase makes a piece of RNA, messenger RNA, that then goes out into the cytoplasm, and then translation happens. And in translation, that messenger RNA becomes associated with a ribosome and transfer RNAs, and the ribosome links amino acids together that are brought by the transfer RNAs. Okay, this is the same process in all cells. It's why all cells have a nucleus. It's why all cells have ribosomes. Okay, what makes different cells different is that in some cells you make certain proteins, and other cells will make other proteins. And so a gene is used to make protein, and that protein then works in the cell. Okay. All cells run this basic process, but if they make different proteins, they become different cells. That's that section on differentiation in the book. Cells become different because they make different proteins. And so that's a key activity of cells. Another key activity is the cell cycle. Okay, that the cell cycle we're looking at the life cycle of a cell. Cells spend a lot of time in this interphase where they look like they have an intact nucleus. They carry out their function. Particularly, they do a lot of that G1 stuff. But if cells get to be a certain size and they get certain signals from the surrounding cells and other places, they copy their DNA and they get ready then to make new cells. And that happens in mitosis and cytokinesis. Mitosis is the division of the chromosomes in the nucleus. And then after that, you have cytokinesis. So I like this diagram, except it doesn't show cytokinesis. Cytokinesis probably happens during telophase. Okay. All right. Then chapter 4 goes over epithelial tissues. This again is mostly lab material. Okay, I won't have any pictures of tissues on the exam. There would be questions on the basic tissue types. What makes an epithelial tissue? What makes a connective tissue a connective tissue? What are the jobs they do? That type of stuff. And in addition, there's some tissue level functions that we see at organs. And so organs are just combinations of tissues. The simplest organs are membranes. There's a membrane here, one layer of cells, and underneath is another layer, a connective tissue layer. And here's a nice picture of the membrane there. Functional parts of organs are tissues. Tissues are just groups of similar cells. The tissue is damaged. The first thing that usually happens is inflammation. That happens when histamine is released. It causes blood flow to increase to that area. That's vasodilation. Then the blood vessel starts to leak. It becomes more permeable. That's edema. And you get migration of cells coming in there. And so all of this stuff makes the tissue becomes swollen, becomes reddish, hot. It'll be painful to the touch, and it may not function as well. This is really this first part of regeneration. The leaking of materials into the tissue will cause clotting. You'll get fibrocytes that will invent and start producing fibers there if there's damage, and that will repair things. Okay, so let me escape there and stop the sharing. I'm hoping that seems somewhat familiar to some people. Did anybody recognize any of that? Maybe? Let's see, I think I muted everybody. A little, okay, a little bit. Okay, does anybody have any questions? This is a good time to ask. Do we have to know this? Do we have to know that?
When does our exam, what time does that open?
It'll open, I think, at 12:30. It should say that on your Moodle page. And it should, I think it stays open till tomorrow night at midnight. So you can do it today or you can do it tomorrow, but you've got to do it before then, because after then, it's going to close and you'll be in deep water. You'll have to get a hold of me. And then I will shake my finger. Why didn't you do that? Okay. Any other questions? That's a good question.
For the essay questions, do we get to pick which two we're doing, or are you picking for us?
So I put in, when I make quizzes and things like that, I put in if you have 10 questions, I put in 20 and it randomly assigns you questions. So in that respect, I pick. So not everybody will get the same questions. That's a good question too. Anyone else?
Do we only get one attempt?
We only get one try.
One attempt, yes, one attempt. You have 60 minutes. Okay. So your one attempt, if you're trying to do this in a car with one attempt and you get far away from a cell tower, that would be that it'll kick you out and then you're doomed. So you want to get into a spot where you know you're going to have good internet service and you want to stay there. And so also, like when I work at home, I know at home, I know that I have good service in a couple spots. But if there's something important to do, I have to take the iPad away from my son because he's gaming, and he can do. Sometimes he will do something that will cause the internet to blip, and if that happens, it'll kick you out, and again you're done. So you want to make sure you have good internet service. Tell anyone else at home no gaming or something like that, or just hide their computer for a while. Okay.
Questions are on the exam.
Pardon?
How many questions are on the exam?
There's 2 essay questions, and then 35 to 40 multiple choice, true, false, kind of fill in the blank type questions. So you have 60 minutes. Figure you've got to answer those questions in about a minute and a half a piece. And then you're going to need 10 minutes for probably the essays. Any other questions?
For the essays, I know you said something about like 6 sentences, but the instructions on the thing say 2 paragraphs. So what are you like actually looking for there?
I'm looking for well-written sentences that explain things and refer to actual examples or logic or the support behind it. If you make 1 long paragraph, I'm good with that. If you have 2 shorter paragraphs, that's okay. If you have 2 sentences, that's probably not enough. If you have, 2 huge long sentences, that's probably not so good. I'd like you to use standard sentences. In science instructors like me, we all struggled in English class. We don't want allusions or allegories or similes or metaphors. We don't like that because we couldn't make those up when we were in school. We want short sentences that state facts, that explain things. And so it doesn't have to be fancy writing. It has to be clear, short, clear, concise. Whenever there are long sentences, scientists don't trust them as much because we don't write them well. Okay.
If we reference the book, do we have to like say a page number or something like that?
No, you do not. You could, if you want to reference the book, you can just say, use an indirect quote. The book says, don't copy out of the book. You write it in your own words. Don't find the 3 sentences in the book that you think are related and type those in, because I know where those sentences are too and I can copy them. Put it in your own words. Say, well, the book says something like this, and I think this is important because of that. But it shouldn't be something you copy. It should be something that you write. Okay. And look at those now. You can look at them now. You can kind of think, how would I answer that? I could talk my way through those. You should be able to talk your way through those now. At least. Okay, those are good questions. Anybody else?
I don't know if you took attendance, but I got into the Zoom call kind of later because I was having trouble.
As did I.
Got you
Could
down.
not find a link.
Me either.
It should be the same link over and over because it's a recurring thing.
I had to clean out my
Uh-oh.
email, so I couldn't find it.
Oh, it might be in the, I think it's in the, no, it's probably not. Send me an email. I'll send you the link. Because
Okay, thank you.
yeah, send me an email. I'll send you the link. Okay,
I have a question about the chapter quizzes.
sure.
So, okay, so when you're all finished with them, they don't tell you what questions you got wrong. And I like to use them as study material. So like after the quiz is shut down, can you like set it up to where it'll tell me what answers were wrong?
I could, but I won't. Okay, and there's two reasons for that. One is that some people are taking it late. And so even though I have this hard and fast rule, you have to take it by this date, people come with, really good excuses. I had an organ removed. I was just released from jail that night, various things like that. And then I give them an extension. And so they have these excuses for that. And then I reuse those questions on the exam. So a lot of the questions that you're going to see on this exam will look very familiar because they'll come from the quizzes. And so if I give you the correct answers, then I can't reuse those, and I have to write new questions. And I'm writing hundreds of questions all the time anyway. It's driving me crazy. Yep.
I'm not asking for the right answer. It doesn't tell me what question is wrong, like what answer is wrong. It just tells me that there's so many wrong.
Okay. Well, you should feel confident about some questions. If there's a question you really don't get, okay, if you look at this and say, well, I got 3 wrong and I have no idea if this question's right or wrong, then say, okay, I took this question, Mr. Nowicki, explain what you're getting after here. Explain why there's what should be the right answer, because you should be able to kind of figure it out. And the whole idea is that you take these questions over and over and over, these quizzes over till you get them right. You should be getting 9 or 10 on every one. Okay, and it's a practice issue. So, but when you're stuck on that, bring it to lab or just email me and hopefully then I can get to you in a day or so. Okay. Okay. All right, we're coming up on 30 minutes. I'm gonna end this. Okay, so it'll open later today. You've got till tomorrow night. Make sure you're in a good location when you take it, and we'll see how it goes. Don't worry, there's lots of tests. It's only the first one. Okay. All right. So study hard and good luck. I'll see you next week. All right. Bye.